Talk Show. Recorded live.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Online Auction Radio Live. I am the host, Metz Mom, and today is March 26, 2015. Now, before we begin, I do want to apologize for the show earlier this month. Well, not the show, but the issues that took place at the time of the show. Between the issues that were on my end from having changed the phone number and the issues with TalkShoe not letting me in and not being able to get to them and them not being able to get to me or to fix it, the show ended up being recorded on a different channel and then transferred to this channel. Now, it still isn't perfect, but, I mean, I've done it at least 10 times, and I'm really so unsavvy on the computer that it still isn't perfect, but it is up. The show with John is up on the channel, and you can check that out after the program tonight. You'll hear my dogs going off halfway through it. It's like, you're trying for dead quiet in the whole room, because the way I did it was recorded it onto a recorder, then recorded it onto the show and everything. And so my dogs decide halfway through, or the mailman decides to come, and it just goes berserk. And then the sound quality just wasn't quite what I would have expected it to be. So I'm still working on it. I'm continuing to work on it until it is easy on the ears and has no dogs going berserk in the background halfway through. All right, I just I just had to take some time out from working on it. It's trying and failing, even by the 10th and 15th try. It's just finally I had to put it aside. Okay, so we're going on with tonight's show, and as everybody knows, I do have a hard and fast rule on this program, and that rule is that we don't trash other sites. As my grandmother said so many years ago, no one has to look bad for us to look good. That is a direct quote from my grandmother. She's long gone, but the quote itself is as fresh as the day that she penned it. And with that said, I want to point out that there is a difference between trashing a site for sport and factually reporting the goings-on at a specific site or in this business specifically. And with that in mind, this show has been a long time in the making. It's been a long time coming, however you choose to phrase it. Tonight we are going to probably open what one would call a can of worms, but it's one that needs to be opened. Everybody wants to do it, but having the nerve to do it's a whole other story. And I have to tell you, I do have the nerve, and I know my guest does. I'm a little bit nervous about it, but we're going to see where this goes. I want to point out, again, that we are going to try very, very hard to make sure that where it's a fact, that it is called a fact. Where it's an opinion, it is phrased as an opinion. Rumors, we've tried, researcher and I have tried very hard to make sure that nothing that we have is any kind of a rumor. It has been very, very, we've been working on this for months, actually. All right? My guest tonight did start, he started and has successfully led a grassroots movement against the Bay. He has the fastest-growing social media pages for any eBay, anti-eBay group, anti-Bay group. I'm trying not to use the E word there. And it continues to grow daily. He recently released an eBook that actually runs the same gamut as tonight's show. I want to please welcome to the show Researcher 135. Everybody say welcome. You there?
Good evening, Metzi. How are you this evening?
Doing just fine. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic.
How's the weather?
Thank you for having me as a guest. Go ahead.
Where are you located in the country? Because I'm wondering how with the weather being so wonky. What's your weather like where you are right now?
Right now it's beautiful, sunny and warm. I'm in northeast Texas. We had our bout with snow a few weeks ago, but now everything's clear and it's nice and warm.
I asked that question specifically because I know that as we were chatting before we went live, people were talking about your voice, and I wanted to make sure they understood that you were not, that your accent is authentic. It's where you're from. Researcher 135, which is the moniker that you use, it's so long. Do you mind if I call you Rich?
You may call me Rich. That will be fine.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you for being on the show tonight. It's it really has been a long time coming, but here we finally are. You and I have been working towards this show, and what people don't realize is that we've been working for months towards this show. I have to admit that I'm still a little nervous at the thought of the subject matter, the rise and fall of an e-commerce giant. Now, I'm not nervous like one might think. I know that the research has been done, the facts have been checked and rechecked, the source is confirmed and backed up, and all that other deep-throat Watergate stuff that comes along with doing a show like this. But it's more, I think, that we're actually opening a can of worms on the air on a program that represents a rival in this business. I think that is what makes me just a little bit nervous. So I'm ready to go if you are.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'm glad to hear it. All right, so we're going to get to it. We all have stories about why we've left the Bay behind and moved to other sites. The most popular, which site that people are moving to, of course, is our site, onlineauction.com. My story is really simple. I sold at the Bay for about 2 years. I left in February of 2008 for two major reasons. One was fees, and the other, which is the one I finally couldn't live with, was because of an upcoming change at the time that was in their policies. The sellers would no longer be allowed to leave anything but positive feedback for buyers, or feedback for buyers, meaning that the bad buyers or their competition would own the sellers. Even though the change would not take effect until May of 2008, I knew that it was going to be trouble. Basically, I figured out ahead of time that my competitors would be able to purchase from me and leave me negative feedback, and I would be helpless to do anything about it. I tried to tell others, but many had to learn the hard way, and learn they did, that the Bay does not want small sellers. That move, in the end, the feedback move was really the beginning of the end of the Bay for me. When I start looking back at where they started, where they've come, where they were, where they've come, exorbitant fees and no control over my business, or what I thought was my business.
Absolutely.
We all know better. It wasn't our businesses. I moved to onlineauction.com, where I pay $96 a year for damn near unlimited listings. I actually have several stores, and combined, those stores do not add up yearly. I mean, we're talking for the whole year, do not add up to what my one last month that I paid for my Bay fees over at the other site. I get the entire year for several stores for less than my last month at the Bay. And, of course, everyone knows I love Ola, so let's move away from me and let's begin your journey. Why did you leave the Bay?
I left eBay because they began to slap 21-day holds on my PayPal funds based on a couple of low DSR ratings that were totally unwarranted. Now, a DSR rating is a detailed seller rating that a buyer leaves for a seller. It does not have to be truthful. It does not have to be accurate. It's the star system where a seller is graded by the buyer 1 to 5 stars, with 1 and 2 being poor or low. And it can be used as a retaliatory device by a disgruntled buyer. And this is what's happening to thousands of sellers nationwide. The DSR system was put into place as a mechanism, a weapon, to whittle away at, basically to get rid of the small sellers gradually. And a remark was made somewhere that I once saw quoted, we will let the buyers take the sellers out. So that is, in fact, the mechanism that was put into place to reduce the ranks of small sellers on eBay.
And then why you ended up leaving. Now, you have started this grassroots movement that actually took hold and really gained some major traction. And part of the reason is that you had an insider. Is that correct?
That is correct. I started the first group, former eBay sellers, back in December of 2013. In January 2014, a gentleman who prefers to remain anonymous, both then and now, contacted me, talked to me over the phone at lengthy periods of time. I took several legal pads, yellow legal pads full of notes. He provided me with a lot of inside information because he worked high up at eBay for a period of time a few years back. So he has the inside track on what's going on. He was able to confirm much of what I was uncovering, much of what the small sellers on the eBay discussion boards were reporting, much of what Ina Steiner had been covering in her articles over on E-commerce Bytes, and much of what her bloggers had been posting on her blogs.
And you've used Ina Steiner as a lot of your sourcing and back-checking sources. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And I don't think that you can find a better person to back up your sources. One of the things that, guys, we're going to try and take questions as they come up in the chat room, because Rich is looking at the chat room, and as they come in, I want to try to go through what we have here, and we are going to have a Q&A at the end. So it's like, hold your questions if you can, or remember them, write them down or something, so that we can get them answered. One of the things that was just asked or mentioned was that my husband read Corn Country Treasures from onlineauction.com. My husband read on one ad that the seller loses points if a buyer asks questions that affects the ratings. Is that true? Do you know if that's true, Rich, or is that a rumor? Or
my experience has been that a buyer can pretty much leave whatever feedback they want to, whether it's justified or not. Ditto with the detailed seller ratings. They can leave whatever DSRs they want. It's virtually impossible for a seller to challenge successfully and get rectified incorrect DSRs or incorrect feedback. The outsourced customer service reps, generally speaking, have no juice, as the term is used. They have no power to do anything. They're not authorized to remove an unfair, unwarranted low DSR. And so basically, a seller can be unfairly penalized by the whim of a buyer.
And not just by the buyer. And I do want to point in response to your question, Corn Country, in response to the question, which again is that if a buyer asks a seller a question, that they can lose points.
Yes, that's correct. That's under the new defect rate. A new thing was put into place a few months ago to where if it can be an innocent question on the part of the buyer, but it will still result in a seller receiving a defect. That's correct.
And that actually, and what you were just talking about with the whims, a lot of what we found out, or what Rich has found out, which was amazing to me. I know I always thought it was happening, but it was kind of that rumor thing. You don't want to actually say anything, but it's like, but you and down deep inside, and that is correct. It's where it's the whim of whoever is operating the group, or the particular the moderator or whatever. And we are going to get into that. And it actually is, so it is true. We'll see as we get further in how it gets backed up. But meanwhile, yes, and it's sad. And it's basically on the whim of how the eBay employee is feeling that day. It sucks. The things that Rich found out is amazing. Let's break some of this, Rich, starting with using actual topics. Okay. When we were going over, buzzwords and things that we did, we kind of went in an order that you gave me, and I love the order, so I did not change it. So this should correspond directly with your notes. Okay. Since I am not an expert in this, Rich is going to do a lot of the talking tonight. I'm going to basically head him into directions, and I'm going to let him go. He is an expert on this. I'm not. The first thing on here that we have down is competition between sellers, Bay itself, the ads, defects, and DSRs. Let's go. Let's start right there, and so we can mark these off.
Okay, I'm ready when you are.
Okay, defects and DSRs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we went over it. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Okay. The DSR system, known as Detailed Seller Ratings, that was instituted by Donahoe in 2008. Now, keep in mind, buyers and sellers had done just fine from eBay's inception in 1995, when it was originally created by Pierre Omidyar, all the way up until 2008, when Donahoe took over as CEO. So the DSRs were unnecessary. They didn't need to exist to begin with. Everybody was doing just fine without them. Everybody was doing just fine when sellers could still leave feedback for buyers, negative feedback when necessary. So both were eliminated at the same time. The ability of the seller to leave negative feedback for a buyer was eliminated, and the DSR grading system was put into place to enable buyers to whittle away at the small sellers.
It actually, and we will go over part of why that happened here, which again was very interesting to me. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and bring that. Let me find it on my notes here. But let's stay in our order. Okay, sanctions. Let's move on to sanctions. And before we do that, I want to say something. What you said about Donahoe. One of the things that you and I talked about, and I firmly believe that when Donahoe came in, I think Donahoe was brought in. He had been trained by Meg Whitman herself.
Yes, absolutely. They had worked together at Bain Capital. Yeah, he came from Bain Capital, which is asset strippers. So he comes from a background of asset stripping,
which we will get to here shortly. And I do think that while he did, he has been a bad CEO, in my personal opinion, while he has been a bad CEO and has basically turned the Bay into a direction that sellers no longer want to go down if they're not the bigger sellers. I mean, and I do mean big sellers. And right. I think 40 to 60K minimum is what we figured out was where that line is drawn. Somewhere in there is that line. But I think that one of the things Whitman did before she left, and she was getting ready to, of course, make a run for office and everything. Right. And that one of the things that she did was she set him up kind of as a fall guy. I don't think that he was smart enough to come up with this stuff that immediately followed his taking over. I think that she kind of set him up, basically putting her in a position of, look how awesome I ran this company. Look how crappy he runs this company. And I think he kind of got a bad rap on that. Now, does that mean that I think that he couldn't have turned it around? Oh, absolutely not. He absolutely could have turned it around and got off of the Whitman wagon and done something good and done something right, but he didn't. He continued on, and what he continued on with, let's talk about sanctions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, there's several different sanctions. For one, a couple of low DSRs will not only result in 21-day holds being slapped on your PayPal funds, on a seller's PayPal funds by eBay. Also, the number of items they can list per month will be restricted. And then ultimately, it doesn't take very many low DSRs or much bad feedback or even neutral feedback. Now, with the new defect rate that's in place, it doesn't take much to get a seller completely suspended, to get them completely...
Neutral is counted as a negative, isn't that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
That was a recent...
Neutrals are now treated as negatives, and neutrals also create a defect.
There you go. Mm-hmm. With the feedback, now we're going to start tying these kind of all in together a little bit. Okay, the competition between the sellers, the selling and, kind of like slicing each other's throats. You have the Bay right in the middle of that as well, because they're also selling product that is as the Bay itself, not as personal like John Donahoe's got an account, but as the Bay itself. So it's they know what's already what's the top selling thing, or what's trending, I guess would be the correct proper way to say it. And then they put that up against their sellers. The only sellers that can compete with that, and this goes to the competition between the sellers, is the big box sellers. Okay, so now we take that, we add to that the defects and the DSRs, we add to that sanctions,